Hey guys, in part 2 and part 3 we looked at how to get price related and candles related data from the charts. In today's part 4, we're going to be looking at putting indicators on the chart and getting information and reading from the indicators. Once we have both of those, the price related data and the indicator readings, then we can in part 5 probably go ahead and start writing smaller EAs, putting conditions of when to buy trades, when to open trades, when to close trades, and how to open and close positions. What we will cover today is collecting indicator readings, and we'll look at examples of moving averages, RSI, MACD, Bollingerband, and Ichimoku. So let's head to Metatrader. And today I've already started with a blank template. You know how to do that from part 1. And I've stored that as part 4, indicator readings. Now, before we go on, just one point again to emphasize, please get your computers, open up Metatrader and type these things with me if you're not already aware of how to do these things, because typing and doing this with me will probably help you more remember. So on the initial template, we have 3 functions. The initialization, all the codes here are going to be run on initialization of the EA. The deinitialization, all the codes here are going to be run at the closing of the EA. And then our favorite on tick function, where every code is run whenever there is a new tick data that arrives in MQL. Here we have our global properties portion, and this is where we define our global variables as well. Now, the simplest way to collect information of an indicator reading from the chart is to use a handle. And this you define here in the global part as an integer, and you can call it anything. I like to call it handle, and then I put the name of the indicator. So now, because we're going moving averages first, so I'll say it's a handle and moving average, and that is it. Now I need a variable to store the values that I read from the indicator. So I'm creating a variable, and I know that the reading I'm going to be getting back is going to come back with decimals. Moving average normally has decimals after it, or has values after decimal. So then I have to assign it to a variable which is a double variable in nature. So I'm creating a double variable and I'm calling it moving average. Once I have these two, then I can go on to the initialization. And I'm doing it in the initialization because I want the indicator to be applied to the chart as soon as we apply the expert advisor to the chart. And secondly, it should start our variables that we have created here are also started on the initialization. So I'm going to use the handle moving average, and I'm going to assign it the value. And there are constant functions or standard functions within MQL, and they always start with an I. So when you say I, and then you start typing the name of the indicator that you are interested in, it will start to open up. So RSI, I moving average, and that's the one that I'm going to use. And then you can already see there is I MACD as well. We're going to be using IMA. So once I hit the enter button, then it opens up the brackets, and within the parentheses I have to provide certain values back to the system. So the first thing that I need to provide is the name of the symbol. So what symbol to apply it on. Then the time frame, on what time frame are we applying that indicator? Is it 1 hour, 5 minute, 15 minute? Then what is the period of the EMA? Is it 200 period, 50 EMA, 100 EMA, 20 EMA, so or SMA? So the period of that. And then the shift of the MA. Now shift in the context of EMA basically means at what bar to the left do we want to start the calculations from. Now normally, when you're calculating the MA, you don't really worry about which bar to calculate it from, but in certain cases you might want to start it from the 5th bar backwards or 10th bar backwards, which is more applicable to other things than MA, so we'll basically not be applying any shift. Then the method, which is whether it's EMA, SMA, what do you want. And then the applied price, whether you're applying the calculation on the close price, the open price. Now, if we go back to Metatrader, let's in fact go to Tradingview because it's easier to see here. So if I apply a moving average to the Tradingview chart, and if I go to the settings, what I can see here is that I need to provide the length. So for example, I want 200 period average. Then I also have to say whether I'm applying the price or the calculation is based on close price, open price, or median price, high, low, what do we want? I normally go for HL2. And then if there is an offset, which is the MA shift. And these are the variables that we need to provide within MQL as well. Now, what we don't have here, but we also have it in MQL, is whether we want to apply it as an exponential moving average or simple moving average. So coming back to Metaeditor, let's just start providing those values. So once I open, and you know from the previous part, we can just provide the value of the symbol as symbol. So whatever chart we're applying it on, that's our symbol. And then here, We can provide time period current or any of the periods, 1 hour chart, 2 hour chart, 4 hour chart, daily chart, weekly chart, monthly chart. So what's the chart nature? But then what I prefer to do is basically here up above, I normally ask my user to provide an input of the type time frames, and I call the variable time frame. And there I can start with period 1 hour, but then the user can define it whether they want 5 minutes or 15 minutes. The reason I do it, I already explained in the previous video in part 3, so you can go check that out as well. Coming back here, so where were we? Here. So we have the symbol. Now we need to provide the time frame, and I already have a variable now where I'm assigning, or the user is going to be assigning the time frame for the chart. So we say use the one that is stored in the variable time frame. Then for MA period, I'm going to create another variable here. I'm going to ask the user what do they want for the period length. And because it's normally provided in integers, so I'm going to use the integer as the variable type. And let's say it is MA, or input MA period. And let's say the initial value that we're providing is 200. So now we can come back here, and there we can, instead of providing a hard-coded value, we could provide a hard-coded value as well, but we're giving the user the chance to then input it. So I'm going to use that variable. Then the next one is shift. I don't want any shift, so we just go to the next one. Now the next one is whether we want mode EMA, mode simple moving average, or weighted price moving average, or simple weighted moving average. So I'm going to ask the user what do they want, and there I can again go for an input, and the enum type which is available, again go back to part 2 if you don't understand enums, there I have covered it, is the MA method, so moving average method. And let's call this variable input of MA method. And for the starting value, I go mode EMA. I like exponential moving averages, so I'm putting it there, but then the user will have the chance to select what do they want. So we can go input MA method. And then the last thing we need to provide is the applied price. So if we are asking our user to provide all of these things, why not ask for that as well? So let's go create enum, and the type of the enum available is enum applied price, and I'm going to call it input applied price. You can call these variables whatever you want. This is just my own style of writing. Whenever I'm asking for an input, I normally start with an INP, so I know that it's an input, and then I try to write the name of the variable that I can remember. So we're asking for applied price. So let's just start with the default value of price median. So now we can come back here and we can provide that value as well, which is we are gonna be applying the price from the variable input applied price. We hit the colon to tell MQL that we have finished this line of code. Now, if you didn't want to ask the user for the input because you're just doing a quick backtest, what you can also do, or what you should be doing in that case, is basically just applying the IMA and just go symbol, and then put your own time frame if you're applying it to half one, and then just go period 200, no shift, apply the method EMA, and the applied price is price median. And this way you are hard coding the values, and these cannot be changed then. But if you're asking for your input from the user, and the other thing that you can use it for, and let's go to Metatrader to see it. Okay, as you all know, if I hit the compile button, then basically the MQL is going to take these scores and it's going to compile it into an executable file, which then I can use in the Metatrader. So I've compiled it now, there are no errors. Let's go to Metatrader. So now when I come to Metatrader, I can already see that part 4 indicator reading has been compiled. It's available for us. I can drag it here into the strategy tester. If you don't know how to reach it, it's here in the view. You go to strategy tester. Now in the input tab, these are the 4 values that we were asking our user to provide. And this is why we started with input. If you start with input, then they appear here in the input tab, and then the user has the chance to select. The first thing we wanted them to provide is what chart value or what time frame do they want. Then what is the applied price? This we defined as an integer, so they can input the value here. Let's go back to defaults. And then they can select within the MA whether they want exponential, simple, or whatever. And then what type of price do they want to apply. These are the ones, if we go back to Metatrader, these are the 4 that we asked them to provide as an input. So whatever they provide there, it's going to be stored in these variables, and then we're assigning it to this integer variable that we have created as a handle, and this is the one that we're going to be using. So once you have put it on initialization, then now this indicator is going to appear on the chart unless you specifically say here not to show it. You guys are probably aware by now that I do not like to see grid on my chart. So here I've just coded charts at integer, and I'm asking the grid to be off by providing the value false. This is just my own preference. So let's get into onTick function, where now we can start reading these values. Okay, before we go down there, one small mistake that I want to correct is that I should have created this as an array. Previously, when we just said moving average without having these square brackets in front of it, the system will read it as a variable which can only store one value. But because we will be reading from the chart, and I mean, not for the moving average maybe, but for certain other charts, we might want to get 3 or 4 readings. And in that case, we do want to store more than one reading into the same variable. And in that case, we create it as an array by putting these brackets. So now the system knows that moving average variable, it's a double variable, so it will have decimal values. But also it will be able, or it is an array, so it will be able to store more than one value at one time. So just a small correction. So now we go back to the onTick function, and basically because of here, this code on the initialization, the handle moving average is already started. So now the values are there in this handle, and we need to copy it into the variable that we have created. And the way to copy it is basically going copy buffer function, and in copy buffer, you have to specify what's the handle of the indicator that you're using. And in our case, we know it's handle moving average. Then the next thing that the system asks you is the buffer number. Now, in case of moving average, there is only one line. So there's only one buffer. But imagine for Ichimoku cloud, there are more than one line. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 lines. So there are 5 buffers available. Which is why this copy buffer function, it asks you what buffer value do you want to copy. Is it line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and line 5? Now in case of moving average, there's only one line available, so we're going to go 1. Now the next thing it asks is what is the starting position? So when do you want, or which value do you want? Is it the last bar or last from last bar? When do you want to start? Let's suppose, in our case, you want to start from copying from the last candle that has formed. And then the third thing it asks is how many values do you want to bring? And this is why you remember we created the buffer variable, because we can store more than one value. Now in a simplest case, I only want one value, which basically means return the value of the MA on the last candle. But if I say 2, then I'm asking for the MA value of the last candle, but then the candle before as well. Now, in case if you were interested in developing an EA where you were comparing, I don't know, the value of the MA on the last candle versus 100 candles back, in that case, you will be asking the system to copy 100 values starting from the last candle. Let's do it that way. So let's get 100 values. And the last thing, it is where to copy it. We are copying the values from handle moving average, but which variable do we want to copy it in? And that variable that we created was the moving average array variable here. So we want to copy it here. So we go copy it there, and then we close the code. So now these values are copied. But now because we're storing 100 values, it is a good practice to set the array as a series by using the function set array as series and giving it the name of the array. In our case is moving average. What this does is basically, sometimes MQL can do weird things, and then it can return the 100 values from here, but then it might not be in order. So the value of the last candle might be in 57th place. The value of the 57th candle might be in the 3rd place. And by saying that array set as series, moving average, and then calling it true, then we're telling the system that we want the moving average array to have the index done properly. So the last candle should be in place 0, the the second last candle should be in place 1, and it always starts from 0. So now that we have set it to this, now we can create our first variable, which is double MAX1, which is the MA or the moving average value at the last candle. And this is just my convention. I use it this way. So I go MA, which is moving average, and then X1 tells me or helps me remember that this variable is about the last candle. And that will be equal to moving average variable and the place 0 from the moving average. Again, the arrays start from position 0. So they start from 0 and then go all the way up to 99. In case you are storing 100 values, it doesn't start from 1 to 100, it starts from 0 to 100, 0 to 99. So the first candle or the last candle is stored on position 0. So I'm copying that value, and then I can copy the value of MAX100, which is the 100 candles back. What was the value of the MA? That I can again get from moving average, but now asking for the position 99, which is the value 100, but position 99 in the array, because the arrays start from 0. So this is how we get the value. Now let's print it on the chart as a comment, like we did in part 3, to see whether we get the right values. So I'll go ahead and write the code. So here we're printing in a comment. So it will be appearing on the chart, and we're asking it to print the value of MAX1 and MAX100, providing the values from the variables. Can go back to part 3 if you don't understand this part, where I've covered the comment section more in detail. Now guys, one more mistake that I have done, I'm probably a bit too drunk today, is that you actually have to provide the value 0 here in the buffer. Now when we were talking about the buffer, just to remind you, the buffer was the number of lines which are there available in that indicator. So in case of moving average, there is only one line. But as is the case with arrays, they always start with the value 0. So the first line is going to be in place of 0. The second line is going to be in place of 1. So if you have 5 lines like Ichimoku, they will be assigned a value of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So in case of moving averages, there is only one line. So that is in the place 0, not 1. The 1 would be the second line. So with that correction, let's go ahead and compile it. Let's go to Metatrader. And here we have our EA. We have the inputs as the default. So let's start it and see what happens. So now we're getting the moving average printed on the chart. And if I pause it, then we're getting two values, which is the MAX1, which should be the last candle value here. So the moving average was 124.2751, which is correct. And then probably somewhere around here, 100 candles back, the value was 143.84, which was this one. So this was 100 candles back. So this is how we get the value of the moving average, and we can pick up any value of the previous, God knows however many candles are available on the chart, and store it into different variables in the way that we just did. So now let's go ahead and look at RSI. So same principle, instead of handle moving average, I'm going to call it RSI. Instead of calling this array variable as moving average, I'll call it RSI. I don't need these, I'm going to leave them. And then our handle RSI is going to be based on IRSI. And then again, we provide the symbol value. Then for the time frame, we provide whatever input the user provides. Now MA period again, let's just go with input MA period. And then what's the applied price? So let's use again the input applied price. Now this one is not used, the MA method, because that's a method for moving average calculation. So we don't need it for RSI. Let's delete it. The RSI is normally 14 periods. So I'm going to start with the default value of 14 period. If the user wants to change it, they can change it. So this is how we have applied the RSI for the handle. And now we're going to go here, and our handle name is now handle RSI, and our array variable is RSI. So we need to set RSI as true. And again, we are collecting the last 100 readings, and we are using the buffer number 0 because RSI also only has one line. And an intermediate tip is that instead of 0, you can also write here main line, which basically means the main line. So if there is only one line, that's the main line. But for now, let's keep it to 0. And then we have the RSI, and then we're going to call RSI X1 equals to RSI position value 0. and RSI X100 equals to RSI position number 99, which is position number 99 but the value number 100. So I'm going to print here RSI X1 and RSI X100 as RSI X1 and RSI 100. So now let's go ahead and compile it. We don't have any error. Let's go to Metatrader, and there is still the input MA value is 200 because we've changed the value in our EA, but the system doesn't pick it up automatically. So I'm just going to right click and go to default, and now we have the 14. So let's start the EA and see. So here is our chart, and now we're getting the RSI here and we're getting the RSI value. So if I pause it and then let's read the values, the second to the last bar had the value of 54.12, which is being printed here, and then somewhere around 100 lines back we had the value of 60.79, which I'm just going to trust that it is a value. I'm going to trust my 10 years of coding. So let's go back, and now we're going to look at MACD, and this one is going to be an interesting one because there are two lines in MACD. Now coming back to Meta Editor, I'm going to clean up the variables. I'm going to pause the video and do it, and then I'm going to come back and explain. So I've changed the variable name. So now we have handle MACD, double MACD, and then we're keeping this all. We don't really need the MA, but instead the MACD requires three values, which is the fast EMA, the MACD SMA, and slow EMA. So 12, 26, and 9 are the values, the default ones. So here you can create three inputs of integers and ask the user to provide those three values, but I'm going to hard code them, but you already understand how to ask the user for the input. So I'm going to hard code them as, so I'm using the MACD, iMACD now, and when you open the MACD and start typing in the stuff, then it's going to ask you for these things. So it's going to ask you for simple, time frame, which is the same, but then it's going to ask you for fast, slow, and the signal period, which is 12, 26, 9, as we have already seen here, 12, 26, and 9. And then at the end, you have to provide a value of whether to apply it to close, high, low, median, whatever. And I'm putting the value of default as input price here. So let's just call it in price close. So now the user has only two, but if you wanted to ask the user for these, you can provide input integer values here as well. So ask them for the values. This I've cleaned up. And then when we go to on tick, now it's going to be a little bit different because now we have two lines. So we're copying the first line of MACD, the buffer number 0, into the variable MACD. And once we have put that here, then we can assign it to a MACD signal line. So I'm going to call it MACD signal line, and that will be the MACD 0, so the last value. And then I need to do exactly the same thing again and copy buffer, but this time I'm getting the second buffer because MACD has two different lines. One shows as histogram or a line, but there's the K line and there's the T line. So I'm getting the second line as well. Once again, I'm asking for 100 values. I'm not going to use them. I'm going to store them into MACD. And now I'm creating a double MACD histogram variable. And now I'm assigning again the MACD value 0, but this time around it's going to be copying the buffer number 1. And now if I go ahead and compile, then I should be able to get the values, but let's also get the comment correct. So MACD signal is equals to MACD signal, and then MACD histogram equals MACD histogram. Let's close and put the colon. Let's go ahead and compile to see if we have any issues. We don't seem to have any issues. So we go back to Metatrader. Let's start. And now we're getting a histogram and the MACD values. And if I pause it, then at this point in time, the MACD signal value is minus 0.18. Oh, I got it the other way around. One is this, so it's minus 0.23 on the last bar, minus 0.23, and the histogram value was 0056, which is here. Let's go back and correct it. So buffer number 0 was histogram, and buffer number 1 was actually signal line. Now if you compile it and then go back and run it again, we have the value of the on the last candle of 1-1516 for the signal. For the histogram, we have the value of -0.080. So which are the values we are getting here. This is how you get the MACD. Once again, if you wanted to have the value of 100 candles back or 200 candles back, you know how exactly to do it, which is to come back here. You have already copied 100 values here, 100 values here, so you can create a double calling MACD histogram x100 and then assign the value of MACD 99 to it, because 99 position stores the 100 value. And same for the signal, you go double MACD signal x100 or whatever variable name you want to assign to it, and then go MACD 99. Just remember, first copying the first buffer as 0 into the MACD array, so then you can assign the value to histogram, and then you go ahead and copy the second buffer, which is a signal line, into the MACD array, and then from there you can then assign it to a variable of MACD signal. So this is how we do the MACD. Guys, now the video has become very long already. It's almost half an hour now, so I'll stop at MACD, and then I'll come back with the next part, and then we'll look at Bollingerband and getting Ichimoku as well. So then you will have the entire set, and this is how you will do it for ADX, ADR, I mean any variable that you want to do, or any indicator that you want to get the value for. So you basically assign it a handle, then you create a variable where you're going to store the values, and you create the variable as an array, so you can store more than one value. Then you can ask for inputs if you want to, otherwise you can hard code as well. And then on the initialization, you basically you assign to that handle that you have created the function within MQL, and then provide within that function the parameters that the function needs, either through input variables or hard coding them. And then on every tick or on every candle tick, then you basically go and use the copy buffer function to then copy from that handle the value of the buffer number, starting from which candle and how many values do you want the system to return into the variable that you have created to store the values. And because this is an array, so it will have more than one value at a time, so you want to set it as a series. And then because it has more than one value, so then you create a variable which you want to use and store the value using which position number do you want. So position 0 is candle 1 and then backwards. So until next time guys, cheers, stay safe, trade safe. Do leave me a comment below to let me know if I'm going too fast or if I'm going too slow. Any feedback is very highly appreciated. Leaving a comment also helps me understand to help you guys in a better way. So do leave a comment, and then see you next time.